The sound got quiet. It was just this overwhelming peace. And in that moment, I just got this message from God. It said, don't worry, everything's where it's supposed to be. Everything is well. Just spirits. I just felt connected to uncountable number of spirits. Behind this blue stained glass was this immense white light, just bright, a white light. I was just being drawn to the light very slowly. People, how God values people for their souls and nothing else. And there is life after death. It was September 12th, 2010. We had a lot of rain that year, and I lived on this small river called the Blanco River. And typically we kayaked it a lot, but what we really liked to do was wait until we had a big rain and the river would come out of its banks, anywhere from 6 to 18 feet. And we'd wait a day or two for the water to go back down and to clear up. A lifelong friend of mine was working at the South Pole, and he was about to go back to the South Pole the week after this. And I called him up and said, hey, the river's perfect. We had a flood Thursday. Could you come down Sunday and let's run the river? On the way down to the river, my wife was telling us, to be careful as usual. And for some odd reason, I said, well, if anything happens, the will and life insurance policies are in the top drawer of the nightstand. And she's like, oh my God, what'd you say that for? And I said, I don't know. That was a poor attempt at a joke. 3/4 of the way into the trip, there is this big, flat, smooth part of water. And what it is there's a low water bridge, and it's up probably, I'm going to estimate it's probably about 7 or 8 feet tall. And it had the water backed up behind it. It serves kind of like a dam. And the water was about 8 or 10 inches going over the top of the bridge. And on both sides of the bridge, on the upriver side and the downriver side, there's these kind of bricks. It kind of reminds me of looking at a castle, a wall in a castle, how you have these maybe 18 inches wide and about 6 or 8 inches tall, and then gaps in between them. And basically what that's for is they put those on those bridges, so when the water's coming across the top of it, it keeps a car from sliding off the edge of the bridge. So anyway, my friend Bobby Humphreys, my lifelong buddy, goes across the bridge, and on the downriver side of the bridge, the front of his kayak hits one of those posts or blocks, and the current turns his kayak sideways. And I come in behind him, and I rammed his kayak with my kayak, and we're just a couple old buddies having a good time. And I'm like, hey, get your butt out of the way, you're holding up traffic here, and just joking around. So anyway, I stick my hands down in the water, and I push myself back, and I figure, well, I'll just push myself back and scoot over and drop off the edge of this bridge, And when I did that, I couldn't move over because the back end of my kayak had gotten stuck between two of those concrete blocks on the upriver side of the bridge. So I just decided, well, no big deal. I'll just push myself completely off the bridge, and then scoot over and go around him and drop off on the other side of the bridge. And all that kind of went as planned. But when I started to go across the bridge, the nose of my kayak hit one of the blocks, and the current turned me sideways. And I'm in an open kayak, so I just figured, well, I'll hit the blocks, and it'll kind of tilt my kayak up, and I'll fall off in the water and swim my kayak over to the edge of the river and get back in and keep going. And all that happened, like I thought it would, except when I fell off the kayak and I went down into the water, I got about not quite waist deep, and all of a sudden I just got jerked under the water. The only way I can describe it is if somebody just tied a winch to your ankles and just jerked you underwater. I mean, it's so strong. There's no way to swim away from it. So as I'm getting pulled into the water, underwater, all of a sudden I feel these bumps on the tops of my hand, and I recognized immediately I was inside of a corrugated pipe. And so I forced my feet down and forced my hands up. And so I started pushing forward because I felt like, that was my safest way out. And the water was so strong, I could only make these tiny little steps, like 3 or 4 inches at a time, just pushing myself forward. And I get to the end of the pipe. I did get to the end of the pipe. And at this point, I'm just praying. I'm thinking about my wife and kids. I'm trying to survive. That's it. So as I'm trying to get out, all of a sudden I see this hand come through the water towards me, and it was my friend, my kayaking buddy Bobby. And I reached up and I grabbed his hand. And I always tell people in this part of the story that um, there's something very, very special about the touch of another human being that is irreplaceable. You know, it gave me hope. I didn't feel like I was alone. And I thought, oh, wow, that's it. You know, all I need to do is just a good hard tug on Bobby's hand and a good hard pull with my left arm, my left hand, and I can get myself out of here. And so when I did that, I pulled Bobby's hand, hoping he was going to be pulling mine at the same time. And when I did that, my hand came apart. I lost my grip with Bobby's hand. Just all of a sudden, I felt like I was stuck inside of a like a bubble, and I did the water, the sensation of the water going over me. It just felt like I wasn't being touched by it. The sound got quiet, and it's just this overwhelming peace. And in that moment, I just got this message from God. It said, "Don't worry, everything's where it's supposed to be. Everything is well." And so I just gave me this overwhelming peace. And I oftentimes thought, I've had thoughts about what it would be like to drown. And I always thought, you would start getting kind of daisy and start fading out. And it wasn't like that for me at all. I don't know how anybody else would describe it, but for me, it was just like pure consciousness, like us visiting and talking right now, to lights out. I mean, I equate it to somebody walking over the light switch and turning the light switch off. It just went from total awareness to being in another place in an instant. And immediately when I was transported, or when I lost consciousness, I found myself in another place. And my immediate thought was, man, you got to be bad not to get here, because I didn't feel like I was that good of a person, and I felt like I was where I was supposed to be. And then and the reason I felt that way is that you had to be really bad not to get there, was because I just felt connected to an innumerable number of souls, just spirits. I just felt connected to uncountable number of spirits. And then the next thought I had immediately, I felt like I was looking over my shoulder, and my wife and kids were coming in behind me, just in the blink of an eye. And where I was at was, it felt like it was kind of like a tunnel. And I'm going to estimate, just for definition purposes, maybe 70 yards in front of me. It was like almost like being in a long hallway. There was a blue stained glass, and it was like somebody had thrown a rock through it, and kind of to the right and down from center was a hole, but the hole wasn't round like somebody cut it out. It was like somebody threw a rock through glass, and it had jagged edges to it. And behind this blue stained glass was this just this immense white light, just bright, a white light. And it didn't hurt to look at it. I could look directly into it, but maybe here on Earth, if it was the same kind of light, you wouldn't be able to look into it. And it kind of looked like a kaleidoscope, a little bit like a kaleidoscope, looking at a kaleidoscope where it's kind of changing shades and stuff. And to the left of me and above my head, it was rough, like being inside a cave, but it was covered with this black, soft, like a felt or velvet. And the floor was a black, just solid black marble, but it had the beams that were coming off of the light were kind of reflecting off the floor. And off to the right of me, it was just total endless darkness. Like you could stick your arm out and you would never, you wouldn't see it. It was that dark, that kind of darkness. And so I wanted to get towards the light, but I was just being drawn to the light very slowly. It wasn't like I had any control over my own movement. I didn't have the sensation of having a body. It was like a relaxation that I've never experienced here. It was like, I always tell people that, as relaxed as you can get, you can still feel the touch of your clothes or what you're sitting on or laying on or even standing. This was a relaxation that didn't, it was like the loss of a body. So it was, I don't, it's hard to put into words, because there's no experience that I've had here that defines that. And as I'm getting drawn towards the light, what was kind of giving it that kaleidoscope effect as I got closer, there were people walking just left to right, right to left at different angles in front of the light. And I could see the silhouettes, but because the light was so bright, I couldn't make out who any of the people were. And as I got closer, I wanted to make out who the people were. I was interested to find out, if it was somebody I knew. Who are these people? I never could tell who they were.
You spoke about to your right was kind of like an endless darkness. Was that darkness scary or was it almost comforting in a way?
I felt like I was where I was supposed to be. I didn't feel any um, fear at all. There was no fear whatsoever. It was comforting. The whole experience was comforting.
I love that. And you spoke about how, and I love this line, like when I was looking at some of your past interviews, but you said you have to be really bad not to get here. I think some people often worry about whether their loved ones like made it to a good place. Can you just tell me more about that thought?
Like I said earlier, what gave me that feeling is just it wasn't anything visual, and it wasn't audible. Nothing was audible. Uh, but I just I was connected to all these other spirits and all these other souls. It's just a body of God, and we make up the body of God. And I think that's what it is. You just become part of that.
That's beautiful. I have so many different, and I feel like most people have different ideas of God. Often it's like a single entity, a single person. It kind of sounds like the whole experience for you was God. Would that be correct?
I wouldn't say the whole experience because um, I think it was orchestrated by God, and I think God is is the ultimate being that oversees it. But I felt connected to many different souls, and when I saw the silhouettes walking back and forth in front of the light, they were individuals. So it wasn't like everybody was just uh, thrown into this mold and melted together. It was uh, it was still like there was individuality, but it was all woven together. And one of my old friends, she's not here any longer. She explained it to me one day. We were talking, and she said, "Yeah, just like that rug on the ground." She said, "It's made up of thousands of different threads, and they're all woven together to make up the rug. They all make up the rug to become the rug, but they all are keep their individuality as threads." Does that make sense? And I believe we're all connected here, even on Earth. We just don't recognize it.
It's just such a visual way of thinking about that concept that's um, kind of hard to visualize sometimes.
Yeah.
You also talked about how, as you were leaving consciousness, you were given a message that it's going to be all right. Was that kind of just like a knowing that came over you, or did you hear a voice?
Well, like I said, and I think most people that you talk to that have had near-death experiences, um, I mean, very seldom do you hear anybody say that they actually heard a voice. I mean,
Hmm.
it's like a download. It's like a transfer of information, not necessarily anything that's audible. But no, I just and it wasn't that everything's okay. It was not just that. It was everything's where it's supposed to be. Everything's where it's supposed to be. Everything's okay. And I got the comfort that my kids and my wife will be fine with that message, you know. So, and I think about that sometimes too. Even in the middle of strife and chaos and stuff that goes on in the world, that there is a bigger plan and a bigger purpose that we can't see. The lessons that we're learning sometimes are hard learned. So maybe I mean, it's probably never going to be a big kumbaya moment for us while we're here, but there's a reason for all of it, and the love you feel over there. It's a different kind of love than you experience here, because over here I equate it to like a mother's love or to a child. It's like, oh, Mike is my favorite child. I loved him, but there's a couple things that he does that kind of still annoy me. There's there and that's somewhat conditional. Over there, it's an inclusive love that takes you for everything that you are, your good parts, your bad parts, the things that you've done that you might be ashamed of, and you're loved for all of that. There's nothing hidden. There's no there's you're loved without one single condition. It's a it's a it's a different kind of love. It's an it's a complete, more intense love than we experience over here.
It's something to look forward to.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes.
Okay, so you came back to consciousness. Can you bring me back to that moment?
Just as I was about to get close enough to distinguish who somebody was, the next thing I know is I'm staring at these rocks going and this shallow water and these rocks, and I'm going down towards them and coming back up. And what had happened is after I lost consciousness, I got forced out of the pipe, and my body went tumbling down the river in the rapids. And my friend was able to jump off of the bridge and able to get, I don't know how he did it because the rapids were pretty heavy that day. But he was able to make it down the river and catch up to my body about 70 yards down the river, and was able to pull me to the edge of the shallow water. And and he didn't know how to do CPR. He said my face was purple and it was swollen, and my eyes were fixed open. And so he got me to the shallower part of the river, flipped me over, and he straddled me from behind, and he had his arms around me about the upper part of my stomach, lower part of my chest, and he was just raising me up and down and up and down, and it worked. It resuscitated me, and so the first thing I felt immediately when I regained consciousness was the touch of his arms around me. Like it was just like when I touched his hand when I was in the pipe. It's just like there's nothing that replaces the touch of another human. And I think maybe that's why hugging and handshaking and all those, all the things that we do are so so important, and why they're so relevant. And he just rolled me over on my back, and he was hugging me and kissing me and crying and telling me he loved me. And then he started cussing me out and screaming at me. And then he started telling me he's loving me. And he was in shock. And it was going back and forth between the love and the hate. And it took him a couple of minutes to get himself together. While this was happening, I coughed up water, but not as much as you would think. I crawled up on the bank, probably got about 10 foot up on the bank, and rolled over on my back. And it was just beautiful, beautiful baby blue sky that day. And there were these little bitty white puffy clouds floating through the sky, through this background of the baby blue. And it looked like cotton balls floating across the sky. And they all looked illuminated. And I was just amazed. It was like I was looking at the sky for the first time in my life. I could not believe how beautiful it was. And I just laid there in amazement for probably 5 or 10 minutes, just doing nothing but looking at the sky. And then when I finally did get to a point where I felt like I could get up, I just it was like I was seeing everything for the first time. I felt like I could feel the sap moving through the trees. I felt like I could feel the movement of the grass. Everything was just new to me, and everything was alive, and I felt connected to it. And at that point, I'm enjoying all of this. And at that point, we still have to kayak about another hour and a half, 2 hours down the river to get to our vehicles. We're out in the middle of nowhere. It's just ranches, and there's no houses, nothing around there. So my paddle had gotten swept downriver, and these kayak paddles, they come apart in the middle. So we broke my friend's kayak paddle down, and I took half of it, and he took half of it, and we made it down the river about 10 minutes, and came up on my paddle that had been washed to the bank. And then we continued to paddle downriver about another 10 minutes. So this is about 20 minutes after we had restarted our trip. There is what they call a cowbird or a white egret, um, and it's flying across the river in front of me. Maybe, I don't know, just not very far in front of me. It's coming from the left side of the river, flying across the right side of the river, and it lands in this big cypress tree, like 100-foot high cypress tree. And it's as it's flying to that tree and then lands, the whole time it looks like it's illuminated. It looks like it has a glow to it, kind of like the clouds. And at that point, I just told, I said, God, don't let me ever change this story. Let this always be to your glory. Let this always be your story and about you. And then I turned to and I said, God, don't, uh, uh, you know, however you want to use it, I'm willing. And and then at that point, I turned and looked at my buddy and I said, Hey, Bobby, I said, you're not gonna believe this, man, but I'm really glad this happened to me. And he's like, What? Like I was like, man, I was just in this beautiful place and I feel like I've been in the presence of God. I said, it was awesome. I said, man, it was just incredible. I can't even describe the feeling I had from it. And so and he's still in shock. We make it back to our vehicle finally, drive back home, and my wife's waiting there and she's waiting at the door, and we both walk in, just go right past her. I go in the bedroom and he stays in the kitchen with my wife. And she's a bubbly person. She's always in good mood. So she's smiling and everything. We're both just kind of have our heads down. And and then I go in the other room and she's asking my friend, What's wrong? What happened? What's wrong with y'all? And he started crying and he said, Pat almost died today. He drowned and I had to resuscitate him. And so then they're in there crying together. Then she comes in the bedroom where I'm at, and so we have a good cry and reassure that everything's fine and I'm okay. And then I was like, you know what? This is gonna be weird, but I am hungry. We haven't had anything to eat since early morning, and it's already late afternoon, getting close to dinner time. So we go in to eat at this restaurant in the town that we live near, and I walked in there, and it was the strangest thing. I could hear there was probably 20 people in there, and I could hear distinctly hear three or four conversations at one time, and independently hear all of them at the same time. Everybody in that restaurant uh, had an aura about them. I felt like I could see their soul, and it was so tangible. I felt like I could reach out and touch their soul. It was, and I'm 53 years old at the time. I'm a businessman, um, somewhat conservative. I got kids, grandkids. I mean, this is just like way out of my wheelhouse. I mean, this is like some serious woo woo stuff going on. And so after that happened, I was telling my wife, I was like, man, this is so weird. I felt like I could see those people's souls in a restaurant. I don't even know how to explain what's going on. And thank goodness my wife is super understanding. A lot of people that have near death experiences, they come back and have very troubled relationships after that because people don't understand what they're talking about and can't relate to it. And as a matter of fact, I had to go to the doctor the next day to get checked out. We had a friend that worked at a hospital, called one of our neighbors. They got us in touch with a doctor. The doctor said, told my wife just to keep an eye on me that night. Wanted to make sure that I was okay breathing. And said the thing that we have to look out for more than anything, they asked me a bunch of questions. This was all done over the phone, and I didn't have any memory loss or anything like that that I could tell. And anyway, so he said, no, I don't think there's any brain damage, but what we have to look out for is any kind of bacterial infection, from being underwater and some contaminated water getting in his lungs. And so they kept an eye on me for a couple of days, and then I did have to go to the doctor, and I started telling him the story. I said, man, it was really, really peaceful and stuff. And his comment to me was, I bet you wouldn't say that if you were in a fire. And I was like, okay. And then he said, it's your frontal lobe shutting down. And I just, right there immediately, I just like, that's it. I'm not telling anybody anything. I'm not, if anybody is a little skeptical at all, I'm just not going to mention it. And so pretty quick, within a few days, you kind of develop a sense of what you can share with people and how much you can share. Because, I mean, if you tell people you think you've just been to heaven and you've been in the presence of God and angels, they're like, okay, where's the guy with the white van in the straight jacket, so you have, and it's just people just can't relate to it. It's indescribable. And so a couple of weeks after this happened, and the whole time, another thing that happened is I lost my relationship to time. I couldn't tell you anything. I couldn't relate to anything related to time other than what was happening that day. You could tell me we're going out of town in 2 weeks. I didn't know what 2 weeks was. It just really screwed up my timetable. And and then also seeing the souls, and then the way I looked at people, I had a different understanding of the value of people, how God values people for their souls and nothing else. And you'd see people that were kind of um, underprivileged, or maybe had society would put less value on them. I didn't see them that way anymore. I saw them just as important as the smartest, richest guy in town. And then also people that were prideful and kind of cocky. I would just look at them and I'd kind of laugh, because I was like, man, they don't even have a clue. I mean, the big car and whatever they're doing is has no value up there. It's what's in your heart, and your surrender to one another and how you treat people. That's what matters in your relationship with God. And so all these changes were happening. And a couple of weeks into it, I told my wife, I said, man, this is just really freaking me out. I'm anxious at this point because of the changes, and I'd been a Christian my whole life, but I wasn't a very active Christian. But I went to church and I'd hear a scripture that I'd heard maybe 50 or 100 times in my life. It was like the first time I'd ever heard it. I was like, that was the first time I ever got the meaning of that. And I would just start crying, and I'd just cry through the whole church service. And I was like, oh my God, am I losing my mind? And so after a couple of weeks, I told my wife, I said, I got to find somebody. I don't want to talk to a counselor. I don't want to talk to a psychiatrist. I want to find somebody that drowned and it has had this experience. And so I found the International Association for Near Death Studies, or Near Ions, on the internet. And I got in touch with them at their office in Durham, North Carolina, and they got me in touch with a local chapter here in Austin. And the guy that was leading the group at the time, Ed Salisbury, who's still a really close friend of mine, he gave me a call. And I mean, within 5-10 minutes of talking to him on the phone, I was fine. I knew immediately that he knew what I was talking about. He could relate to it. So that kind of validated my experience. Not that I needed validation, because I knew it was real. And it he let me know that there's going to be other changes that are going to come along, but it's all going to be good. It's okay. It's nothing to worry about. He just comforted me and made me feel like everything was going to be okay, and not to be anxious about other revelations or other changes that would happen to me along the way. Since then, just the way I value things has changed. I have pursued a connection with Christ and with God on a constant, you know, journey ever since. I think that there's a lot of the lessons and messages, about the connectedness of knowing how we're all connected to one another, and how what affects one of us affects all of us. The understanding of forgiveness, the understanding that there is life after death, um, the understanding of how we need to be in service to one another, and treat our neighbors as ourselves. These lessons are old lessons. Nobody's bringing back anything new. I'm telling you, I've met a lot of near deathers, and over the last 16 years, nobody has any silver bullet. There's no people will come to some of the IONS meetings and they're like, I can tell they're looking for an answer to life. Like, what's the magic pill, or what's the secret to life? And I always tell them, I'm like, okay, the secret is you're born, and if you're lucky, you live to be 70 or 80 years old, and along the way you're going to have great times, and then along the way you're going to get the crap kicked out of you a lot of times too. There, there's no the secret is, the magic pill is life. Is we learn and we experience um, life in a lot of different lessons. There's not one lesson every day. If you're in pursuit of a connection to others and a connection to God. You're growing a little bit all the time. Learn from your mistakes, see what you can do better. And I think what that is it's a molding. It's a what's the whole scripture about? He's the potter and we're the clay. It's a tempering that we go through. Life is a tempering to get us ready for the next stage, where we develop empathy, and what it does is it hones our souls to where we can mesh with all the other souls when we go to the other side. That creates this perfect harmony, and that's not done overnight. There's not one answer. I mean, just like people that have NDEs, you come back and you can be a changed person, but you still got the same crap to deal with after an NDE as you had before, maybe even more so, because a lot of times people come back and they're more sensitive, and so you got maybe more to deal with. And then a lot of times near deathers come back and they feel an obligation to share what they've seen or felt, and that's tough to navigate too. So just having an NDE isn't the answer to everybody's prayer.
You did mention your heightened sense of connection, of hearing. How long did that stay, or is it still with you?
No, the heightened sense of hearing physically was
Mhm.
when I was in the pipe. um, but the the heightened senses that you have after the NDE, or for me anyway, was just recognizing the value of everybody's soul. That's
Mhm.
that's how we're valued on that side. It's not your education or your status in society or how much money you have in the bank. None of the material things that we place value on over here mean anything over there. And and even here on earth, in God's eyes, that's not what he's looking for. He doesn't care. I mean, think about it. If you believe in God and you believe he's made everything and he is everything, are you going to impress him with $1 billion bank account? That's his money anyway. That didn't mean anything to him. He wants what's inside of you. And you know that recognizing that, working on forgiveness.
Some people I speak to talk about it felt almost like a homecoming, like they'd been there before. Did it feel like that at all to you, or was this like a completely new realm?
Well, yeah, well, in the sense that it was a different place than I'd ever been to before. Yeah, that was new. But no, you do feel like um, you just feel like that's where you're supposed to be. And for many experiencers, uh, they they go through a phase. Probably happened to me about 3 or 4 years after that accident. You go through a phase, and it lasted about a year for me, where you become homesick and you want to go back there. But you know that it's not your place to determine, when to go back there. That's not up to us. And a lot of times, because it feels so perfect over there, and then over here things can be mundane and chaotic and trivial, and you want to escape that. But that's the hard part of it. It's because that was a piece that you don't get over here, and you want to go back to it. But you recognize that when that time comes, it comes, and until then, there's things to be doing over here. And that feeling of homesickness that I had, it was pretty intense for a few months, but I would say that the overall length of it was for about a year, and then I kind of got over that and knew that there was a purpose to be here. And I feel like that's one of the things I went to this. We used to go to these. They called them Clan of the Fireflies. It was a monastery. I mean, not a monastery, a convent over in St. Louis, where retired nuns live, and they have a retreat center over there. And we would have maybe about 40 of us that were near deathers that would go there. And I went 3 different years. And one thing that I noticed is um, a lot of people were really hung up on, well, what is my purpose? What am I supposed to be doing? I came back. I wanted to stay, but I came back, and you know, what gives meaning to my life. And then it finally dawned on me one day. I was like, okay, we all got the same purpose. It's the two greatest commandments: love God and love each other. And the trick is finding out how to express that love. But we're basically all here for the same reason, to get prepared for the next life.
It is, you're right. It's nothing new. Just the messages that we've heard before. I really believe that.
Well, I think we're just sent back as reminders, as reminders. But I mean, okay, on paper it looks so simple, Love, I mean, how love? Okay, you give me two things to do: love God and love each other. Okay, that's two things, and nobody's ever done that perfectly yet. So, it sounds easy, but it's not. It's hard to love some people. To be honest,
Yeah.
hard to love yourself.
Yeah. And do you think that's as important as those other two commandments?
I do, yes. You know, but you have to come to the realization that that's unattainable for us, and uh, and I think another lesson too. I think is that I've heard a lot of people tell their stories that have had. I didn't have one, but a lot of people stories that have had life reviews, and you know, every one of them that I've heard, they always say that what they thought was important over here in their life review was just glossed over or not even brought up. And a lot of small incidents, little things that they had even forgotten about, that they didn't think were significant at all, over there in the life review were important. And so I always say, well, God's scorecard isn't the same as our scorecard. But I think what that points out is it's not always the product or the end result. I think over there, your motivation and your intent is more important than results. So if you make a mistake and it's a learning experience for you, and you're remorseful about it, or you take responsibility for it, and you want to do better the next time, um, you know that that's probably in God's eyes, that's a not a failure. That's a judgment for success, because in your heart you want to do better, even though you didn't do well that time with relationships or whatever it might be.
That is really comforting to hear because I mean it's the complete opposite here. It's about results and not intent. And it feels like culture is like very harsh on people who have made mistakes. So it is comforting to know that I guess there's just a element of forgiveness and almost celebration for some of the mistakes and the learning experiences that we've had. And I actually wanted to
Mhm.
ask you about that because you did mention forgiveness, I think, a couple of times. Did you learn anything particular new about forgiveness on the other side?
Not necessarily on the other side. I mean, well, I'll tell you this: when I came back, like anybody else, I had issues and I felt guilty about things from the past. I mean, we all do. We all feel like, we came up short here or there. And when I came back, I just felt clean. I mean, I just felt forgiven for everything. I just had this sense of just being Snow White. I mean, not that I was, but I just had this overwhelming sense of relief and forgiveness. One thing I have learned about forgiveness is, it's a process, just like life is. Um, you know, I don't think you can. It's hard. It's hard to just say, "Oh, this person wronged me. I forgive them," and it's all done. There's some things that have happened to me, and where somebody's wronged me, and I say that I forgive them, and then later on I have that ill feeling again, and then I say I forgive them. I think sometimes forgiveness is it takes a long time. It's sometimes forgiveness is hard to do, but you gotta keep working at it. um, I think a change of heart necessarily doesn't happen just by somebody stating something or somebody, making a declaration. A change of the heart sometimes takes time and it takes repetition.
I guess it's a process and not an action, which is
Yeah.
harder.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, actions are easier than a change of heart. A change of heart
Yeah,
is how you feel inside. You can go out and be a do-gooder and do all kind of nice things for people, but if in your heart you despise those people you're serving and you hate that you have to do it, you know, over here it might be judged as, oh, look at all the nice things they've done. Over there in heaven, God's like, yeah, he did all those nice things for those people, but he didn't really mean it. So um, that's going back to intent. It's you got to work on having the right attitude. But I think too, um, going back to the making mistakes, um, you, you gotta. I think people want everything to be perfect, and it's never going to be perfect. And you got to be okay with that. You got to be okay with knowing that you're going to make mistakes, and you'll have chances to correct them, and you gotta practice a lot of self forgiveness. You know, but I think people are under the impression that they can find a perfect life, and there's it just doesn't happen, and you gotta at some point be aware of that, and I was going to say surrender to it or be okay with that. I mean, you always want to make your best effort, and you always want to grow. One of the speaking of growth, though, one of the things that I see a lot, and we're all guilty of it, is not taking responsibility. Like there'll be times where somebody is in a situation where they've made a mistake and they're pointing the finger at everybody. And I always think, how do you get any growth out of that if you don't like? I always try to tell my kids, if something has gone wrong in your life, step back, analyze what happened, and try to see what your part was in it, so you can correct that. I said, even if you can't fix that situation now, learn from it. So when you're in that situation again, you can have a better reaction to it, or act differently.
absolutely. One of the last questions that I had, that I would love to touch on in this interview is I heard about kind of a realization that you had after your NDE about us overthinking things. Can you tell me more about that?
Probably the strongest revelation I had when I had the ND was and it wasn't me, it wasn't you, it was we're. It was like we're overthinking things. Just love God and love each other, and everything else will take care of itself. That's a that's a short statement, but it's a tall order. Just like we mentioned earlier. But and I started thinking about that too. I was like, after that, I got that message. I started thinking about it, and I was like, man, that makes a lot of sense. If if we had in everything that we do, if we had the intent to love and serve other people, man, you wouldn't have to have policemen, you wouldn't have to have soldiers, you wouldn't have to have attorneys. If everybody was trying to be fair with each other all the time and everything that they did and all their interactions, that would be heaven.
Often guests have books or websites. I don't know
Mm.
if you do. Is that something that is there anything you would like to mention to viewers?
I want to say that a lot of the NDE messages, in my opinion, has gotten sidetracked with astrology and mediums, and I would say for for anybody that's trying to work on themselves, look for encouragement, and look for readings, or what, and it's not just about readings either, but look for information that just kind of gets to the core basic values, like we talked about earlier: connectedness, forgiveness, unconditional love, things like, you know, when I say non-judgment, I mean you have to be savvy about, you don't want to put yourself in a situation that's harmful, but you know, less critical of people. I'll put it that way. Encouragement to others is huge too. Service to others, and and not just things that you can read or look at or on video or any other kind of outside information. But one thing that I've learned too is there's different levels of learning. So you can read about love, you can read about service, you can read about forgiveness, all these things. You can read about it, you can meditate on it, you can visualize it, but you have to get out in the world and do it. That's another level of learning. Um, Easy example. You can read about riding a bike, you can look at the videos, you can visualize it, but until you get on a bicycle and ride a bicycle, you don't get the full lesson. So all these things we're talking about are kind of the playbook, the practice field for life. But at some point, to express love and to be loved and to be fulfilled and to learn the lessons that you have to learn, you have to go to work, you have to raise a family, you have to be along amongst friends, and you have to share. And when I say share, I don't mean just sending an email or a text to somebody here and there. You have to live life with other people and walk alongside of other people to get the full value of the lesson.
Love is an action, and we
Yes,
have to do it.
absolutely. Yes. Never a truer statement said.
Thank you so much for your time. I feel just very calm, very wise advice, and I'm very grateful for it. So thank you so much for making this work, Pat. I really appreciate it.
Well, thanks, Lauren. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it. And I'm just the messenger, and I hope anything that's been given to me from God can be passed on and improve other people's relationships.